I know Tara has done many things in her life, but she's never been a warm-up act to President Karzai before. But I want to thank her for doing that and for bringing that special message from Washington today. Ladies and gentlemen, President Karzai is someone who needs no introduction, especially to this audience, but he's earned one. He is, of course, the 12th President of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. He was first elected as chairman of the interim administration of Afghanistan after the ousting of the Taliban on December 5th, 2001, subsequently confirmed by a lawyer Jurga. In 2004, he was elected president, and in 2009, he was re-elected president of Afghanistan. His friend, the United States ambassador there, Ryan Crocker, once said that President Karzai has the hardest job in the world. I could add that it's probably the most thankless job in the world. And he's done it for 11 years. And now he's preparing the ground for what in politics could be an even harder job, ensuring the peaceful transition of power in a young but vibrant democracy. Despite all the difficulties, President Karzai has presided over the building and training of an Afghan security force which is now leading the fight against the Taliban throughout the country. Under President Karzai's leadership, the Afghan economy has been growing at some 8% a year, something that we in the United States are jealous about. He's created circumstances in which the next generation of Afghanis are showing remarkable talent and promise as they rise to positions of influence in the government and the private sector. He has presided over a multi-ethnic cabinet, and through his leadership, Afghanistan has avoided the kinds of sectarian tensions so vividly noticeable in other parts of the greater Middle East. And today, thanks to his leadership, 9 million Afghan children are in school, compared to less than 500,000 when he took power in 2001. And 40% of them are girls. President Karzai, I want to give you a personal anecdote about some of those girls that you made it possible for them to gain an education. Under one of those State Department programs that Undersecretary Sonnenschein was referring to just now, my fiancée and I have been hosting 2 Afghan girls as they complete their secondary education. And for 2 years, we've had the pleasure of learning about them and their lives in Afghanistan, Mashid and Azada. I just attended Mashid's graduation from high school, and she is on her way back to Afghanistan. She has an internship there, and she has put together a library of 5,000 books, which we are helping her transport to Kabul, where she and her brother are going to open the first English language public lending library in Afghanistan. This is just one example of the incredible female talent that you have helped sponsor in your own country. When I told Mashid and Azada that I would have the pleasure of introducing you tonight, they said, please thank the President on our behalf. And they said, please ask him to promise that the opportunity of an education for girls like us will never be taken away from the girls of Afghanistan again. And I told them that I am quite sure that you would make that commitment on the basis of the leadership that you have already shown. President Karzai, thank you for honouring us with your presence here for the second time at the US-Islamic World Forum. And ladies and gentlemen, please welcome President Hamid Karzai of Afghanistan.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Your Excellency, Deputy Prime Minister of Qatar, Excellency Secretary General of OIC, Excellencies, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, Ambassador Endek, for your introduction to this meeting and for your introduction of Afghanistan and for sharing with us your excellent story of looking after two young Afghan girls, educating themselves in the United States, and for the further good news that one of them will be returning to Afghanistan with bringing herself and her books to the country. Thank you very much. This is the 10th forum of the US and the Islamic world. I was previously here some years ago, 3-4 years ago. It's very important for us to recognize His Highness, the Emir of Qatar, for his contribution and for hosting us all here, for making such events possible in Qatar. It's becoming a place for international get-togethers, good for Qatar and its people, and good also for the Muslim world. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the US and the Islamic world is a very vast subject. From the Muslim feelings on the issue of Palestine and the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and statehood, to the current problems of the Muslim world, and to the fog blurring quite often the view of the West, of the Muslim world, in the name of radicalism among Muslims. We are talking of a very vast, indeed very sensitive subject. My job today is to speak more about Afghanistan. But the importance of the subject will also bring me to other issues between the Muslim world and the United States, or in other words, the West. The colonial rule of the 18th and 19th century, continuing into the 20th century, the legacy that it left behind, and the mantle taken over from Great Britain by the United States after the Second World War, brought the United States into close contact with the Muslim world. And this close contact has been affected by Palestine in the first place, and the aspirations of the Palestinian people in the first place. And as the Muslims continued to struggle for that state in Palestine, with many events across the world in between, the Muslim world and the United States and the West came across suddenly with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. In the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the United States and the West helped the Afghan resistance. The Afghan resistance was indeed a resistance of the Afghan people against an invading power to protect our values, to protect our independence, to protect our religion. In this struggle between us, the Afghan people, and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, both sides, the Soviet Union and the West, countries in our neighborhood, and some of the Muslim countries, tried to help their allies by superimposing on them the values that they thought were important for them. The Soviet Union tried to impose communism on a deeply Muslim people, on a deeply religious people, profoundly religious people, strong believers. The United States, the rest of the Western world, and our neighbors tried to impose on our resistance against the Soviet Union radicalism. The more radical we looked and talked, the more mujahid we were called. The consequence of that was a massive effort towards uprooting Afghan traditional values and culture and tolerance. When the Mujahideen succeeded, the next day, as we arrived in Kabul in the form of the Mujahideen government, the United States and Europe closed their embassies and left. And we were left to the wishes of our neighbors and those around. That brought us to the tragedy of September 11 and the destruction of the Twin Towers and the attack on America. And thus the return of the United States and NATO to Afghanistan. As Ambassador Endek indicated, indeed, with the arrival of the United States and the West, the Afghan people felt liberated and gave a strong helping hand to this new arrival in Afghanistan. The consequence of that, working together, was the liberation of Afghanistan in less than a month and a half. Subsequent to that, Afghanistan leaped forward in bringing democracy, a massive free media, a flourishing of education. As Ambassador Endek rightly indicated, 9 million children, 40% of it women, 150,000 students in our universities, more than 10,000 studying abroad. In 2001, 2002, when we created our new government, Afghanistan had, in name, about 1 to 3 universities. Today, Afghanistan has more than 20 public universities and more than 30 private universities and institutions of learning. You know the story of the media, you know the story of the economy, you know all that. For which the Afghan people are indeed grateful to the United States, to our Western allies, to our brothers and sisters in the Muslim world as well. This is one side of the story. The other side of the story, the war on terror, as it began in 2001, and as it moved forward till today, has not been a happy one. Has not been a happy story for us in Afghanistan or the region, or indeed in the consequences of it beyond Afghanistan into Africa and elsewhere. And a subject on which I have engaged President Obama and Western leaders very often. And the subject is, have we succeeded in the war on terror? Have we found a definition for terrorism? Who is a terrorist? Was terrorism to be found in Afghan villages and homes? Did we address the sanctuaries of terrorism? And by waging this war on terrorism, have we brought less radicalism in the Muslim world, or have we caused more radicalism in the Muslim world? The argument is definitely that the Muslim world has seen more radicalism. From Pakistan and Afghanistan, all the way today to Mali and Nigeria. Is this the unintended consequence of the war on terror, as some would argue? Or was this intended by the United States and the West, as some others would argue? Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, the subject of this Islamic world and US is one of immense importance to the relationship, not only of the United States and the Muslim world, but to the whole world. In my view, the West, as led by the United States, needs to explain itself to the Muslim world. Has the United States given an impression to the Muslims of impartiality in the issue of Israel and Palestine? No. Do the Muslims want Israel to go away? No. I, as a Muslim, would not want that. I want Israel and its people to live as much as a state and as a people as everybody else. But I also want the same right for the Palestinian people. That the Palestinian people should live like the Israeli people in peace and prosperity and have a state of their own. Has the United States and its Western allies clearly, in a manner of a clear vision, explained this to the Arab world and beyond that to the Muslim world? Is this the desire in the West to achieve? If it is, then the explanation has not been right. Is the war on terror really against terrorism? If it is, and if it has caused more radicalism among the Muslims, especially among the youth, then something has gone wrong. Have we implemented it correctly? Questions must be asked. And if there is an increasing view among the youth in the Muslim world that radicalism is actively promoted by the West, the question is why? And for what purpose? If this is not the intention of the West, then the West has to explain to the Muslim world if things have gone wrong. And a corrective course for action must be taken. If we in the Muslim world are wrong about our perception of what the Western intention is in the Muslim world, then it is for the Western world to explain to us their intentions and objectives. Today, as we speak, the Muslim world is in turmoil. From Pakistan up to Nigeria. Is this all the fault of the Muslims, the radicalism that we have? Is it because of the injustice, bad governance, and all other factors? Or do we have external elements playing in it? The Arab Spring, for example. Well, we all were happy about this. Just yesterday we had 28 Libyans killed by those who brought about the Arab Spring. Is this what we want? Is this what the Arabs or the Libyans want? Is it not the repetition of the story in Afghanistan after we succeeded in defeating the Soviet Union, but failed to create a government and stability? So, ladies and gentlemen, in my view, and of the experience that I gained in the past 11 years, there is much that we, the Muslims, have to correct in our own societies and governments by educating ourselves better, by learning how to adapt to the changing environment, by showing more tolerance towards the rest of the world, other religions. But there is also a great deal of explanation, especially of good intentions, by our Western friends and by the United States, that today they're not looking to the Muslim world from the perspective of the colonial area, and that they wish the Muslim world well, and that this changed relationship will be one in which mutual interests will be kept in mind, that it is inevitable in today's world, and that we seek to understand one another, that we all have the right to a good life, that we share that world together, and that without that broad understanding on a proper sharing of resources and knowledge and prosperity, that none of us will eventually do well. As we have to explain ourselves to the West in terms of our views and tolerance, I believe the United States and the Western world have plenty to do towards us, because today they are a bigger power, they have more responsibilities, and they have greater impact. So from Palestine and the aspiration of its people to the well-being of the Muslims around the world, and to us working together to removing the causes of radicalism in Muslim societies and to correcting Islamophobia in the West, there is plenty for us to do around. I cannot speak for all, but as a single Muslim person, I assure the West that we recognize and respect their values, their immense scientific progress, their immense ability to do good things, which they have done. Mother Teresa is an example of a Western person, of a Christian person who went to India and became a servant to the masses of India. Muslim, Hindu, Christian, Buddhist, everybody. That example can be given in different ways by the Western world to us, and we must replicate it. Thank you very much.